Claire felt the first hint of trouble the moment she stepped into the busy Seattle airport, even though she tried to convince herself it was just nerves. She had been married to Evan for 4 years, long enough to read his moods, long enough to sense when something wasn't matching the picture he painted. He had spent 2 weeks talking about this special vacation, insisting he wanted to surprise her, insisting she deserved a break, insisting it was time for the two of them to reconnect. Claire believed him because she wanted to believe that. The small distance she had felt growing between them lately could be softened by a change of scenery, by a few warm sunsets, by the simple act of being together without work, bills, or daily stress pulling them apart. As they walked through the terminal, she tried to hold on to that hope, but the energy in Evan's steps felt too light, almost distracted, like he was excited about something else entirely. She brushed the thought away and kept walking, rolling her suitcase behind her. They reached the gate, and just as she began to settle into the idea of this trip being the beginning of something better, she heard loud laughter rise from behind them. Claire turned, expecting maybe a stranger passing by or maybe an airport announcement that echoed oddly. Instead, she saw Mark and Tyler Evans' closest friends walking toward them, waving with so much enthusiasm it made her freeze in place. Her smile formed out of instinct, but it didn't reach her eyes. She loved his friends. They were fun and friendly, always polite to her. But this wasn't supposed to be a group trip. It was supposed to be the trip Evan had promised, a chance for them to talk, heal, and understand each other again. Instead, it suddenly felt like she had stepped into someone else's plan, like she had been added last minute to something she never agreed to. Evan put his arm around her shoulders, telling her this was part of the surprise, that it would be fun, that they would all get to relax together. Claire nodded because she didn't want to make the moment awkward, but inside she felt that small flicker of disappointment spread quietly like a shadow. She wanted time alone with him, just the two of them, because lately their conversations had felt short, rushed, half-finished. She had hoped this vacation would help them slow down enough to reconnect. Instead, Mark was already talking loudly about trying different beach activities. Tyler was joking about losing his passport again. And Evan was laughing with them as if this were a college reunion. Claire told herself to breathe, to wait, to give this trip a chance. Maybe Evan planned something special later, something just for the two of them. But that hope felt thin, almost fragile. When they boarded the plane, the seating arrangement added another small disappointment. The four of them ended up in a row, Tyler by the window, then Evan, then Claire, then Mark. She spent the flight listening to the three men talking across her, discussing sports, work jokes, and memories she wasn't part of. She kept glancing out the window, pretending to be mesmerized by the view. But really, she was wondering how she became an afterthought in a vacation that had been promised as a gift to her. She didn't want to feel jealous. She didn't want to feel ignored. But loneliness can appear even when surrounded by people, especially when the one person you need isn't paying attention. The flight felt longer than it should have, and by the time the plane touched down in Hawaii, Claire had built up a quiet storm inside her chest. She didn't show it. She didn't want to ruin anything. She stayed calm, polite, and collected, even as Tyler made jokes about surfing and Mark talked about booking a boat ride. Evan seemed thrilled to be there, smiling in every direction except hers. She tried to think positive thoughts. The ocean breeze would help. The hotel would be lovely. The sunsets would be beautiful. She could still find a way to make this trip meaningful, even if she had to work harder than she expected. At the resort, everything sparkled: the pool, the palm trees, the rooms decorated with soft island colors. But even beauty can feel heavy when your heart is unsure. Claire unpacked slowly, placing her clothes into drawers while Evan talked about meeting the guys for dinner. She wanted to tell him that she had imagined this moment differently, that she needed him to see her, really see her. But she stayed quiet, hoping maybe he would notice the sadness in her silence. He didn't. Instead, he grabbed his wallet and told her to come down when she was ready, giving her a quick kiss on the forehead before leaving the room. Dinner was lively, But Claire felt like she was watching it from the outside, like she was sitting behind an invisible wall. She smiled when someone looked at her, laughed when she was supposed to. But inside she felt something she could barely name, something between disappointment and confusion. She didn't understand why Evan thought bringing his friends on their vacation was a good idea. She didn't understand why he wasn't sensing how important this trip was to her. She didn't understand how a couple could be physically close but emotionally drifting. That night, when they returned to the room, Claire expected Evan to finally say something. Maybe ask if she was okay or tell her that tomorrow would be their day to reconnect. Instead, he fell onto the bed, exhausted, mumbling something about jet lag, and fell asleep almost immediately. Claire stood by the window, looking out at the glowing hotel lights reflected on the water. She told herself she wouldn't cry because crying wouldn't fix anything. She just needed answers, clarity, something real from Evan. She needed him to remember that they were more than just two people sharing a schedule. They were supposed to be partners, a team, two hearts that promised they would never stop choosing each other. As she finally lay down beside him, she didn't sleep right away. She stared at the ceiling, feeling the quiet hum of the room and the louder hum of her own thoughts. She loved Evan deeply. She wanted this marriage to feel whole again. But now, she was on a vacation she never agreed to, surrounded by people, when all she wanted was one person. And as the waves rolled outside, a slow worry settled inside her that this trip might reveal more about their marriage than she was prepared to face. The next morning, Claire woke to the warm sunlight spilling through the hotel curtains. But instead of feeling refreshed or excited, she felt a tightening in her chest. A sense of quiet dread that this trip might not be what she had hoped. The sounds of waves crashing against the shore should have been soothing. But instead they reminded her of the distance she felt from Evan, the way he seemed more comfortable laughing with his friends than sitting quietly beside her. She dressed slowly, trying to push aside the thoughts that had been keeping her awake, hoping that the day would offer a chance for them to reconnect, that maybe one small moment could break through the awkwardness that had formed overnight. By the time she stepped outside onto the balcony, the scent of salt and flowers in the air should have lifted her mood, but her heart was still heavy. Evan appeared a few minutes later, carrying towels and beach bags, his face bright with anticipation for the day's group activities. He talked quickly about snorkeling, kayaking, and trying a new beachside cafe. But Claire noticed that every sentence seemed directed more at Mark and Tyler than at her, as if she were part of the scenery rather than the reason for this vacation. She tried to smile, tried to appear enthusiastic, 'cause she didn't want to ruin the trip. But it was difficult to match the energy of the three men who were already joking and planning loudly. The sun warmed her shoulders as they walked down to the beach. But instead of calming her, it seemed to highlight how isolated she felt. Standing on the sand while Evan joined in the laughter and excitement with his friends, leaving her on the edges of conversation. She let her eyes wander across the turquoise water, trying to focus on the beauty surrounding her, the waves, the distant sailboats, the swaying palm trees, but each scene seemed to echo the emptiness she felt inside. A longing for connection that went beyond shared activities or group fun. When they joined the guided snorkeling tour, she found herself beside Evan. But he was already chatting with the instructor and his friends, pointing out coral formations and fish. She could feel his presence next to her, warm and familiar, but it didn't feel intimate. It felt as if they were strangers, temporarily sharing the same experience. Claire tried to engage, asking questions about the fish, pointing out small turtles in the distance. But his attention kept drifting back to Mark and Tyler, and she couldn't help the sharp pang of disappointment that cut through her chest. Lunch felt the same, a blur of sandwiches and laughter that she forced herself to enjoy while sitting slightly apart from Evan, realizing that she had stopped looking for his eyes in the conversation, stopped waiting for that moment of connection she had imagined when he promised a surprise vacation. She watched him laughing, saw the ease in his posture, the comfort he seemed to draw from being surrounded by people who understood him in a way she hadn't felt recently. And a quiet bitterness rose within her. Claire didn't want to feel competitive with his friends, didn't want to resent them for enjoying themselves. But it was difficult not to notice the distance between them. The way the trip was shaping around a group dynamic instead of the intimacy she had hoped for. In the afternoon, when the men decided to go on a boat tour, she stayed behind on the shore, telling herself she needed a moment alone, needed to breathe and process the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She walked along the edge of the water, letting the waves lap gently at her ankles, and tried to remember why she had fallen in love with Evan in the first place. The quiet moments, the deep conversations, the laughter they shared when no one else was watching. She felt a longing that went beyond the beautiful surroundings, a desire for something that the group dynamic couldn't provide, a yearning for him to remember her as the person who mattered most in the world to him. Lost in thought, she didn't notice Evan returning until he stood a few feet away, drying his hair and looking at her with a mix of hesitation and concern. "Claire, are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been all day, the first moment of vulnerability she had seen since arriving. She looked up, emotions raw and unguarded, and for the first time all day, she let herself speak honestly. "Evan, I thought this trip was for us. I wanted us to reconnect, to spend time together, but it feels like you're somewhere else." He ran a hand through his hair, a small sigh escaping, and she could see the conflict in his eyes, the guilt that had been hidden beneath his smile and easy laugh. "I know. I thought this would be fun for all of us, that it might take the pressure off. But I see now it's made you feel alone instead," he admitted, his voice quiet but steady, and it hit her in the chest in a way she hadn't expected. For a long moment, they stood on the beach, the gentle waves rolling beneath their feet, neither of them moving, just listening to the quiet sounds of the island and to the unspoken weight of their emotions. Claire felt a flicker of hope, the sense that maybe this moment could mark a turning point, a chance to realign with the person she loved, to remind each other of what had drawn them together in the first place. But before they could say more, Mark's voice boomed from the water, calling out that the boat was leaving, that they didn't want to miss it, and Evan hesitated, glancing at her as if torn between obligation and desire to stay in this quiet, delicate moment. Claire watched him, realizing that their marriage was at a crossroads, that the choices they made in the coming hours would set the tone for the rest of their trip, for the days they had together, and perhaps for their future. She wanted to be angry, wanted to protest, but instead she let him decide, trusting that he would find the courage to put her first, to remember that she was more important than the laughter or excitement of anyone else. As Evan finally made the choice to stay, even for just a few minutes, Claire felt a surge of relief, a sense that their bond was not broken, only tested. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows and painting the sky in warm golds and oranges. And for the first time that day, Claire felt a gentle softness settle over her, a feeling that perhaps beauty wasn't just in the scenery, but in the quiet willingness of two people to face their mistakes, acknowledge their feelings, and try again. They walked back to the hotel together, side by side, fingers brushing. A small but meaningful connection that reminded Claire of everything she loved about Evan, of the life they had built together, and of the hope that even when plans went wrong, love could still find its way. That night, as the group gathered for a beach bonfire, Claire found herself watching Evan more closely, noticing the subtle gestures, the way he glanced at her in between talking with his friends, the way he seemed to pause when their eyes met. She realized that the trip was still messy, still complicated, still not the intimate escape she had imagined, but for the first time, she felt like a participant rather than an outsider. She felt the possibility that tomorrow could be different, that they could take the steps she had been longing for, and that even within the chaos of friends, laughter, and distractions, there was room for quiet moments that belonged to just the two of them. And as the firelight flickered across their faces, reflecting the uncertainty and hope of the evening, Claire understood that love wasn't about perfect trips or flawless plans. It was about presence, honesty, and the courage to confront the gaps that had grown between them before they became walls too high to climb. That night, after the laughter from the beach bonfire had faded into the soft sound of waves rolling onto the shore, Claire slipped away from the group, needing space to think. The warm air was filled with the scent of salt and flowers, and the moonlight reflected off the calm ocean, but the beauty around her couldn't ease the storm of emotions inside. She wandered along the quiet path leading back to the hotel, trying to untangle the mixture of frustration, longing, and hope that had been building all day. She thought about how this trip had started with excitement and surprise, how she had imagined reconnecting with Evan in quiet moments by the beach or under the stars, and how quickly that had been replaced by feelings of isolation as his friends became the center of attention. She stopped on the balcony of their room, letting the cool breeze wash over her as she looked at the lanterns flickering in the distance, floating across the water like tiny promises she wished could come true for her. And Evan. The truth was heavy on her chest. She loved him deeply, but she felt like she had been forgotten. Like this vacation had become everyone else's plan, not theirs. She replayed the day in her mind, from the snorkeling tour to the lunch by the water, remembering the small ways Evan had been distant. And she felt both hurt and desperate for connection, wondering if he even realized how much she needed him to notice her. A soft sound behind her made her turn. And there he was, Evan, stepping onto the balcony with a hesitant expression. The smile that usually lit up his face was absent, replaced with something raw, almost vulnerable. Claire looked at him, sensing that he had finally noticed the weight she carried. And she felt a flicker of hope that maybe tonight, at last, they could speak honestly. He leaned on the railing, the wind catching his hair, and spoke in a quiet voice. The first time all day she had heard him set aside the laughter and energy for just them. "Claire, I messed this up," he admitted, his tone gentle but firm, the words shaking slightly as they left his lips. She blinked, startled by the sincerity in his voice, and for a moment, all the confusion and disappointment from the day seemed to pause. He continued, "I thought if we all went together, this would make things lighter, easier. But I see now that it made you feel left out. I didn't mean for that to happen. I didn't realize how much you were holding inside." Claire's chest tightened, emotions swirling so fast she didn't know whether to be angry, relieved, or heartbroken. "Evan, I didn't need a perfect vacation," she said softly, her voice trembling with honesty. "I just needed you. I needed us." He stepped closer, and for the first time that evening, she noticed the subtle tension in his posture. The way he seemed unsure but willing to face the consequences of his choices. "I was scared," he admitted, "scared that we were drifting apart and that I didn't know how to fix it. I thought if we surrounded ourselves with friends, the pressure would ease, and somehow, it made everything worse instead of better." Claire felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief, the truth finally out in the open. She reached for his hand, and when their fingers touched, it felt like the first real connection they had shared since arriving. The warmth of his hand grounded her, reminded her that despite the tension and distance, their bond was still there, waiting to be acknowledged and repaired. They stood on the balcony, the moonlight and lanterns casting a gentle glow, letting the silence speak between them, filled not with emptiness, but with the possibility of healing. Hours seemed to pass as they sat side by side on the balcony, talking quietly about the days that had brought them here, the small moments they had missed in their daily lives, and the ways they could work to reconnect. Evan shared the pressures he had felt at work, the stress that made him retreat into familiarity and distraction, and Claire shared her loneliness, her longing for moments where they were just the two of them without anything else in the room. With every word, the tension between them softened, replaced by understanding and renewed hope. They laughed quietly at memories from their early days together, the shared jokes that had once felt effortless, and in that laughter, Claire felt something she hadn't in weeks: a sense of partnership, a reminder that they were still a team, still capable of facing challenges together. It wasn't dramatic or perfect, but it was honest. And that honesty was exactly what she had been craving. As the night deepened, Claire felt a shift inside her, a sense that maybe the vacation hadn't been a failure but a wake-up call, a chance to confront what had been missing in their marriage before it became unmanageable. She realized that love wasn't about perfect plans or flawless moments, but about recognizing mistakes, admitting fears, and choosing each other again even when it was hard. Evan squeezed her hand and she felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief and tenderness that made her heart ache in the best possible way. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "let's forget the group for a while. Just you and me. I want to make it right." Claire nodded, feeling her heart lighten, a smile breaking through the worry that had dominated her day. For the first time in hours, she felt like this trip could be what she had hoped for, a chance to reconnect, to remember the intimacy and care that had drawn them together in the first place. Just as she reached for his other hand to hold it tightly, a knock sounded at the door, sharp and unexpected in the quiet night. They exchanged a glance, a flicker of uncertainty passing between them. And Claire's chest tightened once more, wondering who could be arriving at this hour. Evan hesitated for a second, the momentary vulnerability in his eyes mixing with the caution he felt. He moved toward the door slowly, giving Claire a reassuring look. But she could feel the sudden ripple of tension spike in her chest. Her heart raced not with fear but with anticipation. A mixture of curiosity and worry about how this unexpected moment could shift the fragile peace they had just begun to create. Claire stayed on the balcony, the ocean and moonlight framing her silhouette, listening to the soft shuffle of Evan's footsteps as he reached the door, knowing that whatever waited on the other side could test the progress they had made or deepen the connection they were working so hard to reclaim. As Evan opened the door, Claire could hear voices she didn't recognize, laughter or conversation faint in the background, but the details were lost in the rush of emotion that filled her. She felt the warmth of the night, the weight of the recent honesty between them, and the fragile hope that this moment, whatever it was, wouldn't undo the progress they had made, but instead offer a chance for clarity and understanding. She took a deep breath, letting the ocean breeze fill her lungs, letting the moonlight touch her face, feeling both anxious and excited. She understood in that instant that relationships were full of unpredictable moments, surprises, and choices, and that what mattered most was the willingness to face those moments together, hand in hand. The night stretched on, the sound of waves mingling with distant voices. And Claire realized that the path to reconnecting with Evan wouldn't be smooth or simple, but it was theirs to walk together. The challenges, the surprises, and the emotional turbulence were all part of the journey, and she felt ready to face them, knowing that honesty, patience, and love could carry them forward even through uncertainty. As the door opened wider, revealing figures silhouetted in the hallway, Claire felt a surge of mixed emotions, curiosity, tension, and a hint of hope. She didn't know what would happen next, but she felt the steady presence of Evan beside her, the shared understanding that they were navigating this together. In that quiet, moonlit moment, with the ocean stretching endlessly beyond, she realized that the real beauty of the trip wasn't in the beaches or the sunsets or even the laughter with friends, but in the willingness to confront challenges together, to speak the truth when it mattered most, and to choose each other again and again. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the anticipation of what this next step would bring. And she felt alive with the realization that love, even when tested, could be renewed in ways that were gentle, profound, and deeply moving. The night held them in a delicate balance between uncertainty and hope. And Claire knew that whatever unfolded, they had begun to reclaim the connection that had been slipping away, step by step, word by word, heart by heart, and that the journey ahead, no matter how unpredictable, was theirs to share together,